Good to see the familiar faces and some new ones here. My name is Tommy O'Halloran. I am the Vice President of the New York chapter of COREnet, and I oversee much of the content that we've been putting on virtually since the outbreak back in March. So I'll pass this off to Stephen Coulthard, who chairs the Strategy Portfolio Planning Group, who have been the all-stars of the virtual time in COREnet. They've been putting on a bunch of different topics that have been very diverse and very well received. This one is sort of interesting. It's the first of what will be many more events and topics surrounding diversity and inclusion. There's been a real need socially for us to focus on a host of issues, and this is the first one of its kind. I don't want to call it a series, but there'll be a thread in a lot of the content you'll see coming up from our chapter. One interesting thing about today's event that hasn't been present before, we do have a closed caption function at the bottom. So you'll be able to click on that and engage that way as well. And there will be some other housekeeping that Stephen can go through, and we'll then announce the speakers and take it from there. So thanks, Stephen.
Great, super, thanks, Tommy. So before we start, if you haven't attended an SPP call before, we're very strong on audience participation, which means we don't control your audio and video. So if you don't want to appear like one of the panelists or even a moderator, then to improve the experience for everyone, can I just ask everyone to switch their audio and video off now? But please, please, please share your thoughts on the chat feature. And then during the Q&A session, our moderator, Marianne, will call out individuals to turn on their audio and video and to ask the questions that we've selected. And as Tommy just noted, we do have closed caption option on the bottom, so please click so you can all experience that. So today's plugged in session is the first one that we've done which isn't COVID related in the last few months. And we've titled it The Business Case for Universal Design, which is really being championed by one of our committee members, Connie Van Ryn, who is very passionate about it. And I just want to give a shout out because she spent a lot of time pulling this panel together. So in addition to being the right thing to do, as per the FLY, the business case for universal design is clear. With an estimated population of 1.3 billion, people with disabilities constitute an emerging market the size of China. If you add friends and family, another 2.4 billion potential customers have an emotional connection with the people with disabilities. Our panelists today are Kathryn Gibbs, Director Engineering, North America's Facilities Management at Merck, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Leighton Bewley, who is a Director Campus Operations at Ultimate Software, a global provider of human capital management and employee solutions in the cloud, which ranked #2 on this year's Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For. Mike Perry, a licensed architect in 28 states and Executive Vice President at Progressive AE, where he helps multiple Fortune 500 companies implement universal design. And finally, Marianne Waite, our moderator, who is a Director of Inclusive Brands at the Valuable 500, a movement to influence large private sector clients to be more inclusive to people with disabilities. She is also the founder of Think Designable, an agency whose aim was to improve society's relationship with people with disabilities, which earned her a place on the Fortune 30 Under 30 list. And with that, I'll hand over to Marianne, who is going to quickly hand over to Mike to run through a 30-minute presentation on universal design to anchor the conversation. Enjoy the panel.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And yes, welcome everyone to COREnet Plugged In, the business case for universal design. As Stephen mentioned, I am Marianne Waite. I'm the Director of Inclusive Brands at the Valuable 500, and I am super excited to be moderating this panel because universal design is a huge passion of mine. So I hope that by the end of this session, you'll all leave feeling just as enthused about it as I am. And to expand a little bit more on the Valuable 500, for any of you that haven't heard of us, we are the global CEO community, revolutionizing disability inclusion through business leadership and opportunity. Now, our ambition is to fundamentally transform the global business system to create an equal and inclusive society for the 1.3 billion people living in the world with a disability and those people that love and care for them. Because what we believe is that disability is everybody's business, not just in terms of how we should all be employing disability inclusion practices to build our businesses and brands to be better and more sustainable, but also on a really personal level too. And it's interesting because when you start to talk to people about disability, they get a bit nervous. And I'm sure most of you are thinking that, oh, disability's got nothing to do with me. Thank you very much. But in fact, it does. However, we're not going to get caught up in the definition of disability at this point, because the whole idea that sits behind universal design is that we will all experience exclusion and disability as we age at one point in our lives or another. And in fact, those of us who spent the last few months separated from loved ones and climbing the walls of our small spaces and also trying to work remotely, we've all been united in this experience of mass situational disability as a result of the pandemic. And I would even be punchy enough to presume that many of you use assistive technologies on a daily basis, even though you might not think it. But I reckon that most of you would be partial to using a lift or an escalator instead of taking the stairs. Some of you will go for text messaging or WhatsApps over phone calls. And I bet a few of you even wear glasses, or at the very least, sunglasses. So there are loads of examples of how universal design enables all of us. And so one of the main takeaways from today's session should be that if you as a business are not actively working to remove barriers, you are in fact disabling by default. And that sounds a bit heavy, a little bit scary, but don't worry, because for those of you who don't know much about universal design, as Stephen mentioned, I'm going to now briefly hand over to Mike Perry, who's going to give us a whistle-stop tour of a whistle-stop introduction to universal design before we head into the panel. So Mike, would you like to take it from here?
Yeah, thank you very much, Marianne, and hello everyone. So I'm really going to take about the next 10 to 15 minutes and maybe help everybody understand universal design a little, just a bit more. You know, it is, there's a reason that organizations are implementing this in their built environment. And I've been studying and working with corporations really for the last about 10 years now. And it's really interesting to see how this has emerged. So again, I'm going to try to just give you a little bit of a background in universal design. Next. And why does this matter? Some of these numbers have already been mentioned earlier, but again, just to put it in context, there's 1.3 billion people across the world that live with some form of disability, and Marianne talked about they're pretty diverse abilities, and it really represents a buying power of about $8 trillion. And the other thing is when we occupy these buildings, remember that 80% of disabilities are acquired between the working age, between 18 and 64. And I think this is another interesting stat that there are more clothing lines for dogs than individuals with disabilities. Next. So again, at some time, we're all going to experience it. We're going to experience changes in ability, whether that's temporary or permanent, or a disability that is really not obvious to another person. We're all going to experience it. Next. So this number represents, this is from the U.S. Census Bureau, that 20%, and this is across the U.S. of course, but 20% of the U.S. population actually has some form of disability. And that's really huge when you think about it, when you compare it to other areas of need. Next. So we all remember, we've seen these signs. I could remember them for a number of years, but this just doesn't work anymore. So even though our accessibility codes for certain municipalities are embedded with ADA, this just isn't. It's no longer good enough for us. It's a show of kind of segregation and saying it's kind of us versus them. Next. So really, what is universal design? We like to think of it as a process. it's a process that, again, many organizations are embarking on, but it's about enabling and empowering a diverse population. And sometimes we only think about, well, removing physical barriers, but it's also about removing social barriers and truly creating an inclusive environment. And over the number of years that we've been working with organizations, we've shown improvement in these 5 areas. The one I really like to point out, because I'll have a number of individuals say, well, yeah, but what does it cost me? Or, how much is that? And the reality is universal design is a safer solution and reduces accidents within your buildings. And so we like to really think of it as it's just universal design is really a way to improve daily and work life, make it healthier. But the important thing is you need to look through a different series of lenses. Most designs today are for able-bodied individuals, but I think it's important that when we present this to organizations and architects, stakeholder groups, it's not until we present it that they really see the difference in designing for really a diverse population. Next. So everything we do are based on 7 principles of universal design. I'm not going to go into each one of these. These are readily available. You can Google them and find them anywhere. But again, when we meet with organizations and develop strategies to implement in their built environments, they all are based on these 7 principles. So I just really think that's important to keep in mind. Next. So the business case is just keep in mind that every company is touched by this through your entire supply chain. And I'll show you some examples of this later on. We already mentioned just the sheer number of people that have lived with a disability. And we believe that it's a way to differentiate your company with your consumers and employees. Think about, creating a space that really doesn't add cost, making it accessible and inclusive for everyone. And we think it's also an opportunity for growth and innovation platform for businesses. We've worked with some companies that have developed new partnering relationships because they've implemented universal design in their built environments. And Caroline Casey, I love this quote. She's the founder of Valuable 500. And she's really saying that the medical model is being replaced by the social model. And what's really important here is, when we value, we don't exclude. And when we value, we empower people. Next. The other thing we're finding, there are really 5 challenges organizations are having today. Just the reality that your workforce really comes from diverse backgrounds and abilities. And so what universal design does is it removes those barriers and really provides a design that's easy to understand and navigate by many cultures, many backgrounds, and many abilities. The other thing is we have found that many organizations are doing a really good job implementing inclusive behaviors and a culture when they talk about employment and hiring practices, but not many are really implementing it in their built environment. And so if you look at your mission and values, most likely you talk about, diversity, equity, inclusion are mentioned in there, but this is a way for you to actually embrace UD and promote it within your built environment. The competition for talent and employee retention is fierce, and it's a way for you to provide a differential where teams and individuals can flourish. And when you think about the incoming generations into the workforce, this is going to be something that is going to be expected by them. They want an inclusive workplace where, again, themselves and their teams can flourish. Safety, I mentioned that. Many of the strategies that universal design talks about is really about minimizing hazards and reducing accidents on the job. And then there's the other one, renovation over new build. Many organizations are remodeling spaces, not necessarily building new. And I think because of that unique challenge, universal design has a framework of strategies that you can pick from. you know, you don't need to pick them all. They're the ones that are really right-sized for what you're trying to do as an organization. Next. This is from Disability In, just showing you kind of over the last 5 years, the number of individuals who are being hired who have disabilities. Next. So there are some key strategies. When you think about universal design, we're really designing for a diverse user group. It's about equality versus equal access. If you think about ADA, ADA is about equal access. Universal design is about providing equality and really allowing people to make choices and the autonomy to make those choices. It's about removing barriers. It's intuitive wayfinding. A ramp versus a stair sends a really, really strong message, and I'll show you a picture of that coming up in the strategy. Universal design is really, really about promoting independence, allowing individuals who have been, some who have been able-bodied their entire life, now have some form of temporary or permanent disability. They don't want to ask for help. So by creating an environment that has removed those barriers, we empower that individual to maintain their independence. And then visual clarity is another really, really key aspect of universal design. Next. Some other strategies. There's a phenomenon right now with everybody's carrying a mobile device in their hand, and it increases accidents. So we're really keen on visual cues in the workplace and allowing individuals an opportunity to see something, to perceive something, you know, before they encounter it. Multiple modes of communication, whether you're entering the building or whether you're in a conference room or on an elevator, multiple modes of communication are a key strategy of universal design. Egress path clarity. In a panic situation, people want to get out of the building. And so there's a number of strategies that address that. Glass, walls, and doors, architects love, and I know because I'm one of them, we love to design these nice, clean interior walls. But remember that that's probably the second leading accident in buildings are people running into things, and specifically glass walls. Food service access, restrooms, all kinds of barriers in restrooms for individuals that have disabilities, and safety. Next. So we like to think of universal design as really transformational, not a transactional strategy. And in this case, here's an example of just some visual cues. You know, it's a low reflectance floor, the furniture is movable, very clear signage and graphics, a screen for multiple modes of communication, a low and a high desk for individuals as they come in. So a lot of really simple strategies here that many times are really about good design, but universal design really takes a look at what are the best practices when it comes to those things. Next. So this is an example where I talked about, you know, getting, you know, your entire supply chain involved. Just think about if you were somebody who was of short stature or in a mobility device and you wanted a bottle of water. You couldn't reach it. You'd have to ask for help. And so what we've done with some of our clients and looking at when they bring in their vendors who stack the product, we talk to them about why it's important to stack it vertically instead of horizontally. Just a simple no cost, but it's looking through a different set of lenses. Next. So this is a 120,000 square foot building. There are no stairs, no ramps, no steps in the entire building. And so we decided instead of putting in a big traditional stair, and remember that 80% of accidents in buildings happen on stairs. So the ramp also provides a safer solution. And the ramp is really a kind of a deceptively simple strategy. It allows, it embraces everybody, but it also allows people to travel on their own speed, their own path, gives them a chance to pause, and again, reduces slips and falls. And so it's a much safer solution. In fact, in this case, I remember the insurance provider really loved the solution. Next. This is an example of, we love natural light, but I wonder if the designer actually thought about, the high reflectance floor and, the mullions reflecting and columns reflecting. So it really creates not only a slip hazard, but it's also a visual hazard. I remember a quick story when Apple opened up their new building out in California. On the first day, 17 people ran into glass walls. And since then, they've done a kind of a makeshift job of putting up visual warning devices on those glass walls. Next. So there's an assessment process. It really starts with a stakeholder team. And you'll hear a little bit from Kathryn and Leighton. They had a great group of stakeholders when we kicked this off. It's really understanding what you're trying to accomplish. There's an educational piece and an engagement piece to help everybody understand and get them on board. And then there's a series of site assessment tools, whether it's looking at a design on a piece of paper, or whether it's walking an existing building and looking to make some improvements. There are site assessment tools to accomplish that. And then you create a number of standards. But I think the important thing I want you to take away from this slide is, we've identified P1 and P2 recommendations, priority 1, priority 2, and they're really based on the things above, what the organization is aspiring to be, but it includes what's in the best interest of the user of the facility and the economics. So as an example, we'll identify P1 strategies because why? Because they're high impact to the user and they're low or no cost. And so those are the ones that we really, really focus on for organizations, so they don't see it as a kind of an added cost to really implement best practices in universal design. And then there's the option to get the project certified. And again, we track the measures that we determine with the stakeholders up front to make sure that we are continually looking at improvement. So when you do your next project, you can use that information. Next. And I try to run through that. I usually take an hour. So, but I think I did pretty good, 10 to 15 minutes. So
amazing. I'll have to change your name from Mike Perry to Mike Drop. Thank you for whizzing through that. Some great examples and some practical advice as well. And whilst we're on those points, I just wanted to briefly build into that quote from Caroline talking about the medical and the social model of disability, because at Valuable, we've been really trying to move towards the market model of disability. Essentially, that means moving beyond, as you say, basic compliance and corporate social responsibility, the stuff that makes us feel warm and fuzzy. And instead seeing the 73%, that's the latest figures from the Return on Disability report, 73% of people who are touched by disability, and seeing them as a very valuable market, and also a means of unlocking, as you pointed out, Mike, numerous innovation opportunities. So, the business case for universal design. Let's get into the panel. And I'm going to start by asking each of you to quickly introduce yourselves, and if you could also provide a little bit of insight into what inspired the uptake and implementation of universal design in each of your organizations. Kathryn, let's kick off with you.
Hi, everybody. This is Kathryn Gibbs with Merck. Thank you for allowing me to be on this panel today. At Merck, we started our journey back in 2016, and I was asked to be part of a global disability strategy council. And as part of that council, I work in the facilities organization. We started looking at what could we do to make it better on the facility side. We're a global company, many facilities around the world, and universal design was really where we wanted to go with it. Merck, like everybody else, follows ADA, we have, right? But now we wanted to take it one step further. We started to realize that there was, we were missing an opportunity, as Mike said, the recruitment piece. There are so many people, and it's the right thing to do. And that's really how Merck, we started, our organization started getting into universal design.
Amazing, thank you so much. Leighton, do you want to give us a quick intro?
Sure, Leighton Bewley. I'm the Director of Campus Operations at Ultimate Software. And, at Ultimate Software, we've always looked at our buildings as a reflection of our values and how they support our brand and speak to who we are as a company. We see them as a tool that helps attract candidates and retain our employees. And we work to create an environment where everyone can do their best work. So we consider the compliance with ADA standards to be table stakes. It's a minimum standard. And our goal is to deliver a world-class experience that delights our employees and guests. So we've started to use a universal design approach to improve the usability, security, safety, and health of our spaces so that they're welcoming and easily usable by a diverse range of people. The needs of the organization are constantly evolving, and there was an opportunity for our campus operations team, as well as our design and construction team, to partner with our talent management and diversity, equity, and belonging folks to develop a program that ensures that all of our spaces are welcoming for everyone. This includes everything from mobility access to challenges with sight, hearing, folks in the autism spectrum, folks going through gender transitions, and more.
Amazing. And Mike, do you want to add to that in terms of what inspired you?
Yeah. Well, thanks again. As I said, I've been at this for about 10 years, and I think it's kind of I've worked in all kinds of different markets, healthcare and community and higher ed, but it just seemed to be kind of a common link that I've seen in buildings where they just weren't really accessible. They tried to be accessible, but they just really weren't. And again, I look at it as universal design is really, it's a dedication. It's dedicated to designing spaces where everyone is given, what they need to succeed. And again, while it's grounded in ADA, universal design is about those best practices to really creating the built environment that is truly inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And so coming back to you, Kathryn, in terms of Merck, can you tell us a little bit about how the business case for universal design was initially received by leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a top-down sponsorship from our CEO down, and we have many work streams and many teams that are working on different facets, from the technology piece of it to the hiring piece of it, and then on the universal design side. And with that, it's been very well received. We've been really promoting this around the globe. We started at Merck. It's hard to just roll something out. We're a large company. We started with some pilot programs, which were incredibly successful. And we've partnered with Mike, and we have been educating people at Merck around the globe. And last year, and earlier, late last year into this year, I was able to create a universal design standard, part of our mandatory or standards at Merck. And so all of our projects around the globe need to do the checklist with the P1, P2 priorities that Mike mentioned in his presentation. And we look to see what makes sense and what strategies. It's not a one size fits all, because every project is different. Something could be a new build, it could be a renovation, it could just be a little one-off. And so we approach it that way, and we look to see what universal design strategies make the most sense for that project in that location in that country, and we go from there. And it's been accepted globally and really embraced. Once you explain and educate people on the importance, nobody says no. They just say, okay, help me understand more. Very similar to everybody joining today, to maybe get a better knowledge of what universal design is and how the role they can play in it for maybe their company. And that's what they want to do for us too. We want to make it right for all, not only our employees, but all the visitors. And we want to have facilities that attract the very best and the brightest and don't exclude anybody. As Leighton said, we are thinking about things all over from a design perspective. It's not the visible disability that is one that we worry about, right? It's the invisible and the folks that are afraid to self-identify because of other concerns and what their leadership will say, and that's who we're really trying to really design for the people with ADD and OCD and all the people that, you know, have the mental health issues and don't want to share those things. So we want to have places and an environment that's inclusive and available for all.
And it's amazing because I think so many people still presume that disability inclusion relates predominantly to employment, but actually this is as much about visitors and customers as you say. And I think you should feel so proud of everything you've done at Merck, because it's really creating those top-down inclusive cultures is no mean feat. The Valuable 500 have been going, I think, for 18 months. We've been trying to get 500 CEOs to put disability on their leadership agenda. We're at 313, but let me tell you, there has been a lot of resistance. So the fact that you guys are great case studies of what happens when leaders lean in is amazing. And in fact, Leighton, it would be great to hear from you whether you had a struggle in terms of landing the business case, or was it relatively easy to get buy-in at leadership level?
I would say it was relatively easy. So, you know, we're in the people business. And so whether it's our product that we're delivering to our customers that help them manage their full, you know, the tagline at Ultimate Software is people first. And so we're a people first organization, and it was a natural progression. So, you know, the part of the business case is that in order to attract the best possible talent that's out there in the market, you know, we know that we have to have spaces that are able to accommodate a diverse range of employee needs. Now the campus operations team is part of our human resources team, and that's been a match made in heaven for us. And because of it, you know, we're 100% focused on the employee experience. Our visitors, customers, prospects, you know, they hear we're a people first organization, and so this is what they're expecting to experience when they come to one of our locations.
Amazing. And it's interesting. So my background's in brand strategy, and let me tell you, about 99% of businesses that you work with, you ask them what their values are, one of them will be inclusivity, or that they're inclusive without a doubt. When you press them on what that means around disability, they won't necessarily have an answer for that. So there's a lot of purple washing, as we call it, wanting to be seen as inclusive, not necessarily doing the right actions and achieving that. So when it comes to living your purpose, your brand purpose and your brand values, Kathryn, how has the implementation of universal design helped you do that?
So Merck is all about, our mission, it has always been saving and improving lives. That's what we do, right? We're a pharmaceutical company, and we are here to save and improve lives. And that's exactly what universal design does, right? That it improves lives. It improves, our employees, as Mike said, it's also about safety, right? Merck is all about safety. Our safety culture is, you know, at the highest level. And we want to make sure, again, the things we do with universal design are good for all, and it improves our current employees with means of egress and just a whole host of things that we focus on. But universal design, it directly aligns to our mission, and I think that's we've gotten so much support at every level, top down, and we're going to continue on this journey, you know, with all projects around the globe to make it better.
Amazing.
And to continue to learn from ourselves. Every job we learn more and more. We think about new things every job. So.
Well, that's the thing. No one is achieving 100% on this. Everyone is at some point in the journey. So I think it's about being open with that. But interesting what you said about safety, because I think so many people are afraid of this topic because they see it as high risk in case they're not getting it right. And actually the true risk is not doing anything. That's what you've got to be mindful of. So in terms of embedding it, like you say, it's amazing that you've managed to pull it through the rest of the organization. Leighton, in terms of governance, who within the C-suite is responsible for reporting back on progress in terms of universal design?
So with the improvements that we make on a continuous basis, I report that to our VP, and he reports directly to our Chief People Officer. So we have, our CEO has signed the letter and has made the commitment, but the C-level person that's directly responsible is our Chief People Officer.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And because it sometimes the responsibility will sit with different members of the C-suite depending on the organization. But Mike, this is great. We've got two examples here of people that totally are bought in. How much do you experience resistance from clients in terms of whether they should invest in this?
Well, I think as long as we have the opportunity to provide some education up front, the resistance is pretty minimal. Early on in the journey for universal design, the resistance was, it's going to cost me more.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think that today we've proven that it really doesn't have to cost you more. You know, if you have 150 strategies in universal design, you don't need to do them all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, pick 10 of them and do them really holistically through your facilities. And again, you'll see really, really high impact, positive impact to the users of those spaces. And I think the other thing we're finding is people start to feed on it. You know, once you introduce it and you educate the supply chain, people, and I've had them say to me, oh, now I know what you're trying to achieve, or boy, wonder why I never thought of that before, or that makes great sense. So Marianne, I don't find much resistance, to be honest. It's really more about people don't understand it. And once you provide some education, then they seem to kind of, you know, jump on board.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've recently just run a bit of research with our signatories at the Valuable 500, and what keeps coming up is definitely awareness and education seem to be one of the biggest barriers and one of the biggest challenges. So, Kathryn, in terms of challenges, the bits that we don't want to talk about, what have been the biggest challenges that you've faced in terms of integrating universal design, and how have you overcome those?
Yeah, honestly, as Mike said, we haven't had a tremendous amount of obstacles. It's supported, right? Again, it's about education. And so what we've done is we've had partner meetings, we've done lunch and learns, and we've hosted with all of our partner companies, our AEs, our EPCMs, our partners, our IFM partners. We presented universal design and what that really is at a high level. And then we further presented kind of what that high level P1, P2 strategies are, and explained to them that this is not going to be a burden for them, that this is about, again, doing the right thing. And I think at Merck, it's been very positively received because we haven't forced it and said, you will do everything, every 100 plus items on this. It's, again, as Mike said, it's about the strategy and selecting the strategies that make the most sense for that project in that location. And when you approach it that way with an open mind and a very flexible approach, how can you resist? How could anybody resist that? You're saying, look, we're going to work with you, figure out what makes sense and what's great for your project, and we'll go from there. So we haven't really had we have not had any pushback. Just lots of questions and a lot of people trying to get on board. You'd be surprised once it opened up. I get a lot of phone calls. Boy, this is the right thing to do. How can I support the initiative for my area of responsibility?
And so much of it is about giving people permission to do that as well, not just in terms of UD, but disability in general. Once you start to help people understand how it enables them in a personal way, people then feel like they're able to talk about it, and also making it really easy for them. So much of this is about making it easy, as you say, and making it exciting. This isn't just another boring compliance thing. This is an opportunity to differentiate. Leighton, did you come up against any interesting challenges?
So the only challenge that I experienced was getting the original site assessment funded, and Kara Pelletier, who is our Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Belonging, was able to get that piece done. Otherwise, we didn't really face any resistance to make the changes. Once the assessment was completed and the impact ease of the enhancements was socialized, it was smooth sailing. We also had our corporate communications team that did a very nice story on the assessment, and including photographs that were taken while we were doing the assessment with Mike and Andy. And so that the whole thing was very well received by our leadership and our employees.
Oh, that's fab. Having those case studies is so important, because we often get questions from people saying, but really, is it worth the investment? So the more you're able to kind of showcase that, the better. I'm going to move on to the chat questions just after this last one. I have to ask you this on behalf of our signatories. Like I mentioned, we recently conducted a bit of research with them, and it showed that one of the biggest challenges with augmenting physical environments has been overcoming legacy barriers, such as historical buildings that are protected by local laws and regulations. Mike, whilst we've got you, I wanted to ask whether there were any quick fixes or any kind of quick-fire practical advice for people that would be up against this.
Yeah, so I think, again, when I think about a historical building, clearly you can't make certain changes. You're not going to take a 4-story historic building and, tear out the stairs and promote a ramp. That just doesn't work. But within the building, maybe it's a renovation of the restrooms. Restrooms are just a huge barrier for individuals with disabilities. It could be the way providing new furniture, new workspaces, again, without changing the physical barriers of that building. It could be that, you're going to renovate the elevators and make sure that there's, 2 modes of communication for people using the elevators. It could be that you're going to redo some of the graphics and signage in the building and make it, higher contrast, so people with visual impairments can better navigate. So I think it's a number of things like that, Marianne, that you just need to think through. And again, as Kathryn and Leighton have mentioned, there's a whole framework of strategies that the team will talk about, and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense.
That's really encouraging then. It's not an excuse anymore for people to say that they have legacy issues. Good to know they're on the hook. Right, so let's move to a couple of your questions, guys. We've got 2 here for Kathryn. I was going to actually ask if people wanted to unmute themselves, but in the interest of time, I think I might just read them out from here. So Kathryn, could you tell us a little bit more about a successful pilot project that you've tried at Merck?
Sure. It was in our Kenilworth campus in New Jersey, and it was for our Global Human Health headquarters. And we decided that it was going to be an activity-based environment. And we said, look, let's pilot here some ideas, some strategies, right? And so we did that. We have chairs in the lobby that if somebody is in a wheelchair, there's no arms. They could transition nicely if they wanted to be in that seat like everybody else. We have lights, special lights from the front door to the back door that are different than everybody else, and everyone else in the rest of the building. We then have carpet to go under those lights. I call it the yellow brick road. It's not yellow carpet, but if you follow that yellow brick road, you can get from the back door to the front door to the back door. And we had other well, that was like the main highway out, and we had other, I'll call them kind of streets that were different color, and it wasn't a cost thing. It was about visual. So if somebody had a visual impairment, they could follow those lights, they could follow the carpet. But again, it goes back to the safety for everybody. In an emergency situation, right? If there was smoke or anything, people could look to that as a distinction to get them to safety. We have Mike showed a picture of glass. We have a lot of glass like everybody else, and by columns, by glass, we paint those a different color so that there's a visual distinction, so it doesn't blend with the glass. So a lot of those, we have a whole list of them, but some of those are some of the key things we've done. So after the fact, as we toured people prior to opening, we educated everybody. We educated the people moving into that building so that when their visitors came, they could not only educate them, but they could be proud of their facility, right? We have lockers that have handles. What happens if you don't have the dexterity with fingers, right? So we have handles. Mike, make sure we have the right handles on our lockers, and just those simple things that make a huge difference. They don't cost anything, but they're thoughtful and they make a huge difference.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have another question here. I thought it would be impossible to get through this session without mentioning the C word, coronavirus. So Leighton, this, like I say, this pandemic has forced this sense of kind of mass exclusion. Have there been any learnings or new insights that have come about from the COVID-19 period?
Well, our logistics teams was already supporting a diverse workforce where 40+% of our people were already virtual. Now we have 99.5% of our people who are working virtually. So we were already doing the things that connect all the satellites with the mothership, right? Mm-hmm. But we had a lot of internal corporate communications that provided frequent updates on the response to the pandemic and when we expect to return to the office. They've also been doing stories on the campus operations team and other essential people, letting folks know that even though they're not in the offices, we're still there, ready to take care of any employee needs or customers in the buildings. In the locations where we were finishing up a build out or another location where we were doing a renovation, the office managers have been taking pictures of the progress each week and sending that out to the folks who would normally be working in that office so that they're still connected. And then, like I've mentioned before, we had put processes in place. So when COVID first started, almost immediately for people to get chairs, standing desks, their keyboard combos, monitors, whatever it was that they needed in order to be most productive and comfortable at home. We have 15 buildings in Weston alone, so we manage the risk of having folks pick stuff up from our locations, whether it's furniture or equipment, by directing them to one of only 2 phases. Most of the buildings are locked down at this point. We did a lot of splitting our teams into shifts. We have temperature monitoring. We bring in lunch each day for our essential workers so that they don't have to go to restaurants. So we're still very much focused on delivering the best possible employee experience.
Yeah, it's a great example again of a brand that had already invested in universal design and accessibility. And so the COVID-19 pandemic wasn't quite as difficult to get your head around because you'd already got those practices in place. I think that's been one of the most fascinating things to come out of this is, just how well set up these businesses were to deal with those barriers. We've got a question here. Maybe this comes back to, again, landing the business case. So the general tendency is looking at the percentage of people within an organization that are physically challenged and special needs, and resistance comes from leaders and C-suite that is for that 1% or 2%. So I think what they're asking here is that the leaders in the C-suite tend to believe that that you'd be making a lot of changes for a very small percentage, 1 or 2%, and 95% of people won't need them or will be left to feel disabled. Mike, have you come across any such resistance? I know we talked a little bit about it previously, but in fact, that's a good point. If you'd like to, is it Subramanya? If you'd like to turn on your camera and add colour to the question, please do. But perhaps this is again about kind of overcoming resistance.
Yeah. So I think that
we can see you. We can't hear you. Oh, do you want to unmute? I think you're still on mute.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Hi, Mike. Good to see you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to meet you. The general tendency, depending on the organization size, right? Typically, it is a 1%, 2%, or a 5%. When you say inclusive designs, generally we have this Disability Act, and we create these designs specific needs to those people. Like you said, there is a separate signages, separate ramp for those people, and all that. But looking at your new design concepts, how do you face such kind of the resistance from the leadership? Why do you make remaining 95% people also feel disabled because you're making a whole lot of changes?
Well, again, I think that I would venture to bet that if you took a group of C-suite individuals and walked them through a project, one of the Merck projects, as an example here, they would not see any differences. In other words, we're not like putting a ramp in front of everybody and then with lights on it. It's really about good design. It's really about making it better for everyone. In the one project where we did put the ramp in, now that was a fitness facility that had a rehab clinic in it. And so that ramp was really multi-purpose. Not only was it the organization saying we need to embrace our entire community, but it was also about the rehab saying we need a place for individuals who have brain and spinal injuries, a place where they can rehab. So that ramp becomes a program element at the same time. Moms and dads pushing strollers, it makes it better for those individuals, and you don't consider those individuals with a disability. So it really improves. The strategies are really about good design and about creating a space that is usable to everyone, not about being more usable to individuals with disabilities, but it's really more usable to everyone. And again, I venture to say, and maybe Kathryn or Leighton want to jump in, but I venture to say that you really wouldn't notice those changes unless we walk to the space and I would point them out to you.
Yeah, because this also comes with an additional cost. This is not the standard set, right? Because you're making the changes and there will be an additional cost associated to it.
Yeah, again, just the example of the ramp, I just use that because it's pretty iconic. But, we saved putting in a big traditional stair. We didn't put in both.
Yeah.
So we put the cost up for the stair, we put the cost for the ramp, and it's a safer solution and everybody can use it.
Sure.
Yeah, and 100% of your people have a phone. So they already have something in their hand every minute of every day that they can distract themselves with. So when you get back to the safety piece of it, and you're able to, via the lighting, carpeting, whatever it might be, clearly designate, paths. And when you're not on a clear path, that's important. And then also microwaves. So we had a couple of buildings where the microwaves were all overhead. So even myself, I'm reaching up into a microwave to pull something hot out over my head. So it's not just that people couldn't reach it before, but it's really not a safe process for any individual. So, there's lots and lots of these things that you can do, even the quick fixes, privacy in the restrooms, shelving in the larger stalls, whatever it might be that really benefit everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Amazing.
Well,
I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Kathryn.
I would say, having done this now quite a bit, I would challenge it adds money to a project. If you're going to spec a carpet, what's the difference in picking one area that's a little different in color if it's the same carpet, just a different color? The paint on the columns, the same thing. So again, if I'm building something new, we're not going around, right, and just trying to renovate and change things for universal design. We do it opportunistically when we have projects, when we're doing renovations, when we're building new. And so over time, as we continue renovating these things, everything will get done. But we don't really see it changing a conference room table, instead of having 90-degree corner, we have it rounded. Well, that's a spec change that the architect makes. It's not a cost change. It's those little simple things. It's not a big deal. It's just not.
But the bottom line impact surely is offsets any of those costs anyway, because
far offset by having incredibly talented people that you maybe wouldn't have hired coming to your company. And again, the safety for all. Safety for all means everything. One lost, one person that didn't slip or didn't fall or didn't this, it means everything.
And also from the customer perspective, because essentially this is sustainable growth. It's about then opening your doors to as many people as possible for as long as possible. So the bottom line argument is definitely there. I'm really conscious of time, and there's been a question here from Gillian Burgess around universal design best practice and whether there's a guide that would give people this best practice. Mike, do you know if, first of all, such a thing exists?
Yeah, so we, the Global Universal Design Commission has created an overarching guide. What we've done is, again, over the last number of years, by working in different countries and looking at different accessibility standards, we've actually created a proprietary set of tools that incorporates all those best practices. And then again, when we work with Ultimate Software and Merck, we take that intellectual property and we develop custom checklists that they can apply based on, again, what they're trying to achieve as an organization.
Super helpful. Thank you so much. And then finally, just to round off, quick fire, your top tip, Leighton, for anyone who is starting off their universal design journey.
My top tip would be, make sure that you're developing the internal partnerships that you need in order to make the things happen. So there are lots of things, because I have the facilities organization, there were lots of things that we could do, all the P1 type stuff, the priority one things that were low cost, low effort, and high impact. But then you have to partner with your design and construction folks for the P2 type items. So that might be anything that requires permitting, plumbing, electrical work, anything where you would have to get a general contractor involved. Let's say if you only had high top credenzas and counter spaces and you needed to create some lower spaces, we want to put a grab bar for the urinal, but I need the lower urinal on the opposite side than it is today so that I can attach that grab bar to the wall. So developing that partnership with your internal design and construction folks, and them understanding that these universal design principles become a part of their build, like Kathryn was talking about before. So these are our new standards, and it's 48 to center for signage and whatever other things it might be. That's a very important partnership to develop.
Thanks. And Kathryn, just lastly from you, quick top tip.
Yes. So keep it simple. Don't boil the ocean. Baby steps. And keep in mind that it's the simplest of things that make a huge difference. Take what you learn and educate people. Having one more advocate, and they go on and on and on. We're gonna tackle this. We're gonna tackle this.
Amazing. Oh, well, it's such a shame. We're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. But just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone for being such a great audience and for seeing the value in this session. A huge thanks to our fabulous panelists, Kathryn, Mike, and Leighton. A huge shout out to Cornet for having us all, and of course to AI Media for the captioning. And just a final thanks from me to say I hope you all have a wonderful day. And remember that disability is your business. And that's all from us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Thanks. Bye.